And the Soviets say fueling begins today of the giant booster rocket that's scheduled to lift the first Soviet space shuttle into orbit on Saturday. The shuttle, nicknamed Snowstorm, will not be manned for this test mission. The countdown continues at a cosmodrome in Central Asia with no problems reported. Charlie?
Well, the countdown has begun on the Soviet space shuttle. It's set to blast off at dawn this Saturday. Soviet television has shown pictures of the shuttle mounted on that giant booster rocket at the Cosmodrome in Central Asia. They'll begin filling the rocket with fuel today. The mission will be unmanned.
The final countdown has begun for the Soviet Union's version of the space shuttle. Its unmanned test launch is scheduled for late tonight, U.S. time. Meanwhile, the European Space Agency has successfully launched another satellite. An Ariane 2 rocket blasted off from its launch site in South America, carrying with it a new French TV satellite. The European space officials say the launch was a complete success and expect the TV satellite to be operational by year's end.
An unusual French television satellite is in orbit this morning. It was launched by an Ariane rocket from French Guiana in South America last night. By the end of December, the satellite is supposed to begin transmitting television shows with better pictures and stereo sound directly to people in France and Central Europe. It will be the first time something like this has been tried.
The first Soviet space shuttle is on a launch pad in Central Asia, poised to blast off late tonight. The spacecraft, which closely resembles the American shuttle, will make its maiden flight without a crew. French Guiana, another successful launch for the European Space Agency. The Ariane 2 rocket carried a new television satellite into space last night. The satellite will beam television shows directly to homes in Europe and North America. But critics say the receiving equipment will be too expensive for the average homeowner. The Soviets are getting ready to launch their own space shuttle. The unmanned launch will happen Saturday morning. That's our time tonight. Our space technology correspondent, Jim Slade, is in Washington. Jim, the Soviet shuttle looks very much like our own American version. How are they different?
Well, there's a reason for that, because if you want to fly in space as a shuttle flies, that's the way it ought to look. The difference is mainly no main engines in the tail of the Soviet shuttle. You take a look there, they have these big heavy engines in the American shuttle, none in the back. That will make a difference in the way it flies, even though they do look very much the same.
Jim, they're flying the shuttle unmanned. We've been flying ours manned. Can they fly theirs manned if they want to, and is there a difference there?
Well, they won't fly it ordinarily unmanned. This is for test purposes because of safety reasons. That is the thing that makes Western experts the most concerned, however, because their computer technology, their high-speed computers, are not as good as ours, and they wonder if their technology will be able to bring it back safely. Frankly, everybody hopes they will.
Okay, Jim, thank you very much. That's Jim Slade, our technology correspondent in Washington. The first Soviet space shuttle is being loaded with fuel. It's scheduled to be launched late tonight. It'll be lifted into space on its maiden voyage by the huge Energia rocket, capable of carrying more than 100 tons. Unlike American shuttles, the first Soviet shuttle will be unmanned. And the first Soviet space shuttle is sitting on the launch pad in preparation for tonight's blastoff. Unlike American shuttles, the Soviet spacecraft will make its maiden flight without a crew. Off the coast.
The countdown already has begun for the Soviet Union's first test launch of their version of the space shuttle. The unmanned Buran, Russian for snowstorm, is scheduled to lift off from Soviet Central Asia at 11:23 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time tonight. It's to complete a 4-hour maiden flight a couple of times around the Earth. Ariane 2's rocket was launched into orbit carrying a French television satellite that may change the future of French broadcasting. This rocket blasted off from the European Space Agency site late yesterday. It's on the northern coast of South America. Aboard is a French satellite which is designed to increase the number of television channels available to viewers. This is the 13th successful launch for the Ariane rocket in some 13 months.
Jim. 13 is proving to be a lucky number for the European Space Agency. Last night off the coast of South America, it launched the 13th Ariane rocket in as many months. The rocket successfully deployed a French television satellite, which will beam programming directly to homes in Europe and North Africa. However, few have signed up to receive direct TV broadcast to their homes, and critics say the satellite is just too expensive and outmoded.
The final preparations are being made in Soviet Central Asia today for the maiden voyage of the full-scale Soviet space shuttle. We get the latest from CNN's Steve Hurst in Moscow.
The Soviet shuttlecraft fastened to the back of the giant Energia booster rocket, glistening in the sun on the launch pad in Soviet Central Asia. Quiet moments of fueling before it blasts into space. The launch is scheduled for about dawn Moscow time Saturday morning, a delay of nearly 2 days from previously planned liftoff, Soviet sources have told CNN. The reusable craft named Buran, that's Russian for snowstorm, looks remarkably like its American counterpart. The Soviets say it isn't a copy. The resemblance, they say, is a result of aerodynamic reality, not plagiarism. This first flight of the Buran will be unmanned, computer-driven for several orbits with a runway landing expected the same day. The Soviets wanted to see the Buran in flight before chancing a manned flight and a disaster similar to the Challenger catastrophe. The Soviets are masters of manned spaceflight with a nearly continual presence in space aboard the orbiting Mir station. But when the Buran lifts off Saturday morning, the Soviets will be trying to close a more than 7-year gap since the first U.S. shuttle Columbia was fired aloft. Steve Hurst, CNN, Moscow.
CNN, by the way, is working on bringing you live coverage of the Soviet shuttle launch. It is scheduled for shortly before 11:30 Eastern Time this evening. That's 8:30 p.m. Pacific Time. Soviets are hoping for a successful space launching this evening, their version of the Space Shuttle. They're sending the Buran, or Snowstorm, up on a 4-hour unmanned maiden test flight. In a somewhat unusual move, the Soviets are planning live broadcast of the launch from Central Asia, and CNN also is hoping to have live coverage of the launch, now scheduled for 11:23 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. Final preparations are being made in the Soviet Union today for the first launch of a full-scale Soviet space shuttle. The Soviet shuttle Buran looks similar to the U.S. version, but this flight is unmanned, officials say, to avoid any danger to cosmonauts. The shuttle is scheduled to lift off from Soviet Central Asia approximately 14 hours from now. CNN is working to bring you live coverage of the launch, which is set to start at 11:23 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 8:23 tonight Pacific.
The Soviet Union is to launch its first space shuttle tonight on a 4-hour unmanned mission. CNN has been trying to arrange for live coverage of the launch. It is set for 11:23 p.m. Eastern Time, but late word from Soviet television sources is that their live coverage won't begin until perhaps 6 or 7 minutes after the launch. So whether there will be live coverage of the launch remains at this hour doubtful.
We'll tune in late tonight and see.
We'll know.
The site of a Soviet...
О летно-конструкторских испытаниях принципиально новой космической системы. Я подчеркиваю, это рассказ о испытаниях новой системы. Вы видите ракету-носитель «Энергия» и космический корабль многоразового использования «Буран». Всего несколько дней не на старте, а за это время сотни людей из десятков городов страны уже работали здесь. Сейчас идут комплексные испытания. Так написано в технической документации. А в кабинетах и цехах говорят, мы ждем, когда машина задышит. От мысли, от линии на чертеже до машины в металле, до ее дыхания около 10 лет. А вот эти кадры мы снимали совсем недавно, когда вся универсальная ракетно-космическая транспортная система была собрана в единый пакет. Пожалуй, только здесь, в монтажно-заправочном корпусе, можно совсем близко подойти к этой связке и даже попробовать заглянуть в кабину пилотов. Именно отсюда вывозится на старт вся система, а в момент старта от Земли оторвется масса около 2400 тонн. 4 тепловоза, каждый по 1000 лошадиных сил, кажутся игрушечными рядом с установщиком. Посмотрите. Во время вывоза вокруг было не более сотни людей. Поработали над программой более 1000 заводов, КБ, институтов, все республики, вся страна. Даже из космоса, с орбиты видна такая связка. Дорога к старту уже знакома. На макетах отрабатывали эту операцию, тренировались, учились люди, проверяли технику.
Сегодня ранним утром начинался вывоз ракет-носителя «Энергия» с пристыкованным орбитальным кораблем «Буран» на старт. И вот сейчас уже сумерки опустились на космодром Байконур, и здесь в степи загорелось огромное светлое пятно. Здесь ночи не бывает. Здесь на этой стартовой позиции всегда будет день, потому что круглые сутки будет светло, будет освещаться стартовая позиция, и круглые сутки будут вестись работы.
Для всего